Good morning. I'm Professor Yangzhou Li. Welcome aboard Rising China in World Affairs. I hope each and every one of you is well and in good health. This first session is intended to introduce the course, telling you what the course is about, how it is organized, and how it will what requirements you are to meet. As such, this session will be shorter than the other sessions. In this way, I'm honoring the venerable um, tradition of GSPs to keep the first session short. China. China is a big country with a large population. Its landmass is the third largest in the world, and its population is the largest in the world. Uh, Despite its fabled splendor and glory, the country had been humbled and humiliated for over a century by Western powers and even by Japanese Empire since the early 19th century. However, during the last 4 decades, uh, China succeeded in transforming itself into a modern industrialized country. Although the United States is reluctant to acknowledge China as an equal, China has become one of the two leading powers of the world. China's turnaround is most visible in its spectacular economic growth. It was one of the poorest countries in the world until 1970s, but now it is an economic giant. Measured in PPP, or purchasing power parity terms, Chinese economy um, surpassed the U.S. economy at the end of the 2014. That's an officially announced by the International Monetary Fund. Uh, Chinese economy, even in the nominal terms, is the second largest in the world after the United States in 2019. Uh, if China can grow 5%, then it's in 14 years the economy will double in size. So by that time, China may surpass as the largest economy in the world, even when measured in nominal terms. China is the largest consumer of natural resources and products. Since China has been importing so much of these resources and products, that the expansion and contraction of Chinese demand virtually determined the prices of these resources and products, causing economic boom and bust in the exporting countries. With the income and the living standards improving, China imports an increasing quantity of agricultural produces and foods. Here too, changes in Chinese demand are causing market fluctuations globally. Some industries are highly dependent on Chinese demand. An example is the tourism industry and the related industries. In 2018, as you can see at the bottom of the table, as many as 156 million Chinese went abroad. Of course, all these are tourists. Some were obviously business travelers, those who traveled abroad on businesses. But uh, they, these business travelers were only a small fraction. So, except this small fraction of business travelers, most of those Chinese who went abroad were tourists. And as you can see, when you go some famous cities, well, tourist attractions across the world are replete with Chinese tourists. Um, Chinese are now even flooding some exotic places like Morocco in North Africa. Luxury goods industry also leaves off Chinese consumption. According to Bain and Company, a US-based consulting firm, Chinese account for 1/3 of the global luxury goods consumption. A Chinese-based research institute puts even higher figures for Chinese consumption. According to a 2015 report of this institute, Chinese alone consumed nearly half of the world's luxury goods. The world real estate markets are also affected by Chinese buyers. For example, in Greater Vancouver area in Canada, prices of residential real estates more than doubled between 2007 and 2017, thanks largely to strong demands by Chinese mainlanders. Similar things happened in other places that were preferred by Chinese for investment as well as for residence. Well, China looms even larger in the neighboring countries. If we take the example of Korea, well, as in many Southeast Asian countries, China has long become the number one trade partner for Korea. Korea's bilateral trade volume with China uh, exceeded uh, several years ago the volume of Korea's trade with the United States and Japan combined. And many Koreans are visiting China. Well, there are roughly 1 million Koreans live in China on a long-term basis. So these are called the new uh, Koreans, uh, in distinction to the ethnic Korean Chinese. Anyway, 5 million Koreans visited China annually, and as many Chinese tourists visited Korea. Uh, at the moment, the number decreased a little bit because of the virtual injunction against the group tour to China, which the Chinese government introduced after the Korea's decision uh, to deploy THAAD missile systems. Anyway, because of the heavy presence of the tourists, um, well, duty-free shops at the airports and downtown uh, earned their profits mostly from the Chinese tourists. So there had been fierce competition for duty-free shop license among companies. And in some areas preferred by Chinese, like Jeju Island and Shincheon area near Hongik University, real estate prices went up dramatically. In some places, doubled, tripled. Um, and because of the strong demand from China, many Koreans had to give up some delicacies preferred by Chinese, like red sea cucumber, abalone, or the gold-colored fish called busae. So these delicacies became off limits to ordinary Koreans high because of the high prices due to strong demand from China. And if you look at the stock prices in the two countries are virtually coupled. So when stock prices go up in Chinese stock exchanges, then stock prices in Korean stock exchanges also tend to rise. And when the Chinese stock prices fall, then Korean stock prices tended to follow suit. Anyway, China's rise is unmistakable by all means. This course aims to explore how China's rise will affect the global and the regional orders. And basically, we are asking five questions. These are the questions we are going to address in this course. The first question is, how does the rising China affect the rest of the developing world? Is China a threat or opportunity? Uh, well, obviously, we are dealing with the two sides of the same coin. And the second question is, will China rise to become next superpower, comparable to the United States, if not replacing the United States? Well, this question is also worth asking because there are many outside China who question the probability or ability of China to grow as it has. Chinese economic growth rate has been declining since 2011. In 2010, it grew more than 10%, but after that, growth rate began to decline. Last year it was near 6%, and even without the coronavirus epidemic, Chinese economy was expected to grow um, more slowly. Uh, so 5%, 5+%. Uh, but anyway, 5% is still very remarkable growth rate because in 14 years, the economy doubles in size if it grows 5% a year. Uh, so if China can continue to grow 5% a year, then it is a matter of time that China replaces the United States as the number one economy in the world. But but uh, obviously there are many challenges China must to address to continue to grow. So we are going to look at some challenges facing Chinese economy. Third question is how will China's rise affect the global order? Uh, this question is significant because there are actually two conflicting views. On the one hand, mostly Americans believe that China's rise inevitably leads to an hegemonic conflict between the existing hegemon and the rising hegemon. So the United States and China are destined or trapped uh, to go to war sooner or later. This is the so-called Thucydides trap, um, named after the conflict between Athens and Sparta in ancient Greece. On the other hand, there are mostly Chinese scholars who argue that China's rise do not have to lead to war because what China seeks after is not the old uh, the national interests that China pursuing are somewhat different from the national interests assumed by the realist, pursued to be pursued by the states. Anyway, this is a question worth asking, and we are going to debate on the relative merits and demerits of the two opposing views. Fourth question concerns how China's rise will affect the regional order, aside from the global order. And finally, assuming that China becomes a hegemon, the leading power, the order, the global order created by China, what it look like? What will it look like? That's our question. As the class format, basically lecture is the main format, but sometimes I make use of audio-visual materials. So we may watch some films in the class. And we are going to hold a kind of a symposium or seminar with symposium in class. In this symposium, students are expected to make their presentations. And aside from the symposium, students are expected to participate in in class discussion. And the requirements for the course are rather simple. Active participation and presentation each counts 20% toward the final grade, and the midterm and the final exams account for 30% each for the toward the final grade. Thank you for your attention, and if you have any questions, please ask me. Please write down below the window.